Stephen Colbert did not raise his voice. He did not rant. He did not build to a dramatic climax with music and graphics and manufactured outrage. He simply slowed down the tape, played Karoline Leavitt's own words back at half speed, and asked the audience to listen again. And in the silence after the second listen, something shifted in that room that no press briefing and no official statement was going to be able to shift back. There is a special kind of silence inside a late-night studio when laughter changes into realization. It begins with a joke. The familiar rhythm of comedy television is in place. The stage lights, the crowd warmed up and ready, the desk and camera angles, and polished timing that signals to an audience that what they are about to receive is entertainment. But then something sharper happens. The audience stops reacting like viewers and starts reacting like witnesses. They lean forward. They exchange looks. Phones come out before the segment is even finished. And within minutes, the clip is already traveling online faster than any official government statement ever could. That was the atmosphere the night Stephen Colbert turned his focus toward White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt and transformed a routine political segment into one of the most replayed, reshared, and discussed moments of the week. The stage was set for comedy. What arrived was something closer to a public examination of language, of confidence, of repetition, and of the gap between what is said at a podium and what is happening outside the room where the podium stands. Karoline Leavitt had stepped into one of the most visible and most demanding jobs in American government. Every administration relies on a public messenger, someone whose role is to stand at the briefing room podium, face a room full of journalists, and defend decisions, explain controversies, and answer questions under live cameras with the kind of composed certainty that signals the administration has considered everything and found itself in the right. Over the months that followed her appointment, critics and journalists began identifying a repeated formula in her briefings. A major controversy would break, reporters would rush into the room, cameras would go live, and Leavitt would appear, composed, quick, forceful, delivering answers that sounded decisive in the moment, even when subsequent reporting raised serious questions about the factual foundation beneath them. She would assign blame for a crisis entirely to the opposition. She would describe the solution as simple if critics would only cooperate. She would dismiss difficult questions as partisan theater rather than legitimate scrutiny. Each statement delivered individually sounded like normal political messaging, polished, strategic, confident. But Stephen Colbert had been watching the pattern build over time, and he had been waiting for the right moment to play it all back at once. Colbert did not begin with Leavitt. He opened with Donald Trump, a montage, clip after clip. Rallies, interviews, press events, official statements, showing contradictions that could not easily be dismissed as simple misstatements or imprecise language. In one moment, an action was described one way. In another moment, the same action was described in a way that contradicted the first. Policies were praised, then quietly reframed. Declarations were made, then denied, then repeated elsewhere in different words. The audience laughed, but the laughter carried something underneath it. Not just amusement, disbelief edged with recognition. The particular sound of people watching something confirmed what they had suspected for a while, but had not seen assembled so clearly in one place. Then Colbert paused. He said his job was not simply to joke about politics. It was to translate political language into plain English. That was the key to everything that followed, because political language is frequently designed to sound formal, strategic, and authoritative, to move through the news cycle quickly enough that its real meaning never gets slowed down and examined. The formality is functional. The pace is deliberate. The goal is to sound believable long enough for the next controversy to arrive and displace the current one. Colbert was about to remove the speed from the equation. He shifted to Karoline Leavitt. No personal insults, no cheap attacks, no manufactured contempt, just her own words, played in sequence. One clip assigning blame for a developing crisis entirely to the opposition. Their fault, their choice, their responsibility for whatever came next. Second clip describing the solution as straightforward and obvious, if only the other side would stop creating obstacles and simply cooperate. Third clip, dismissing a reporter's documented question as partisan theater rather than legitimate journalism. Each clip, standing alone, sounded like standard political messaging, the kind of statement that lands in a news cycle, generates a headline, and is replaced by the next one before anyone has time to examine what it actually said. But Colbert did not present them alone. He presented them in sequence, back to back, with no interruption between them, and when placed together, the pattern that had been invisible in the individual moments became impossible to overlook in the collective one. The audience felt it before Colbert needed to name it. Then he let one particular clip play all the way through. Leavitt at the podium, speaking with the composed certainty she brings to every briefing, saying that if the other side passed the resolution, all the chaos would disappear, that Democrats had put the White House and the president in this position. If they did not want further harm to their constituents back home, they needed to act. It was very simple. First, listen. Some of the audience laughed, a few nervous exhales. Then Colbert replayed it, more slowly this time. He asked the audience to listen not as supporters, not as opponents, not as people who had already decided what they thought about the administration, just as ordinary citizens, hearing the words carefully. The room changed on the second listen. What had sounded like policy messaging became something else. The confidence that had seemed authoritative on first pass now sounded like something closer to a demand. The simplicity that had seemed helpful now carried a different weight. The weight of a statement that defined cooperation as total agreement and defined disagreement as the cause of the problem it was supposedly solving. Colbert did not tell the audience what they were supposed to feel. He just created the conditions for them to feel it themselves. That is the technical skill at the center of what he does, and what made this particular segment go far beyond the usual late-night reach. Then he widened the frame. He said the issue was not one briefing, not one spokesperson, not 1 week of headlines. It was a cycle, a specific, repeating, identifiable cycle that had been running continuously since the beginning of the administration. A controversy begins. Trump makes a declaration. Leavitt defends it from the podium with complete confidence. New details emerge that complicate the original claim. The messaging adjusts. Reporters point out the inconsistency between the original claim and the adjusted messaging. The reporters are blamed for noticing. The cycle begins again with the next controversy. Viewed day by day, it can feel like chaos. Too fast, too fragmented, too loud to follow. Condensed into a single segment, it becomes a pattern. And patterns, once named, cannot be unnamed. Colbert put visuals on the screen. Maps, timelines, headlines were placed side by side with the official statements that had preceded them. Promises made in front of cameras are compared directly with official outcomes documented afterward. He barely needed punchlines. The evidence became the comedy. The contradictions were so visible, so plainly documented, so obviously structural rather than accidental, that simply presenting them in order generated the same effect that a skilled joke generates: the sudden recognition of a gap between what should be true and what actually is. One of the night's most memorable moments came when Colbert noted that his late-night television program had remained fully operational and open while parts of the federal government had shut down. The audience erupted, but underneath the laugh was the serious observation it was carrying. Institutions designed to govern had stalled. A comedy show was doing the work of public accountability. That was funny because it felt absurd. It was powerful because it also felt accurate. The segment spread immediately and did not stop spreading. Shared across every platform, debated on news channels, reposted by commentators who covered everything from policy to media to political communication. Discussed far beyond the usual late-night audience demographic, reaching people who had never watched the show before because someone in their feed had sent them the clip with 4 words of caption. Watch this. Seriously, watch. Supporters of the administration called it partisan comedy dressed as journalism. Critics called it journalism dressed as comedy. But regardless of political position, the clip had achieved something that neither side could argue with. It had dominated the conversation. And it had dominated the conversation not because Colbert had said anything explosive or personal or scandalous. He had said something structural. He had taken a pattern that had been moving too fast to be seen clearly and slowed it down until its shape became unmistakable. That is the specific skill that this particular moment demonstrated at the highest level. Outrage is common. Audiences encounter it daily, from politicians, from commentators, from social media, from every direction the news cycle points. Outrage can be dismissed. It can be matched with counter-outrage. It can be categorized as bias or hysteria and set aside. Controlled clarity is harder to dismiss. When someone speaks steadily, plays the tape, and lets the contradiction complete itself without editorial addition, the audience has no one to argue with. There is no angry presenter to push back against. There is only the clip and the clip's relationship with the truth. Colbert had given millions of people something rare inside a chaotic political moment. Structure, a way to see the shape of what was happening rather than just feeling the weight of it. This was never only about Karoline Leavitt. It was never only about Donald Trump. It was about the gap, the specific, documentable, repeating gap between presentation and reality, between the confidence of the podium and the facts outside the room where the podium stands, between what political language sounds like at full speed and what it reveals when someone slows it down and plays it twice. Colbert did not create that gap. He illuminated it. And once people see a pattern, they cannot unsee it. That is the real reason the moment mattered. Once the shape of the cycle is visible, controversy, declaration, confident defense, adjusted messaging, blame the reporters, repeat, it is impossible to watch the next briefing without recognizing the architecture. The segment ended. The audience was still laughing, but it was no longer casual laughter. It was the sound of recognition, the sound of people watching the machinery of political spin slowed down just far enough to understand for the first time exactly how the machinery works. In a media environment built entirely on speed, that kind of pause can be more powerful than any prepared statement delivered from behind a government podium. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because the receipts are time-stamped, the tape is archived, and the pattern keeps running until someone slows it down and plays it back twice.